Hey everybody, what does a cowboy hat, a pirate's eye patch, and King Arthur's sword have in common? I can't wait to tell you. And have I got a story for you, matey? Do you know what a trilogy is? It's 3 movies or 3 plays or 3 stories. Well, you know how much I love stories, so I want to tell you a trilogy that uses 3 stories. You know how much I love art, so my trilogy is going to be 3 stories about art. And you know how much I love families, so it's going to be 3 stories about art all in one family. My first story starts in 1882 in Needham, Massachusetts. A couple had a little boy and they named him Newell Converse Wyeth. They called him NC for short. It wound up that he was the oldest brother of 4 boys, and they loved to hunt and to fish and to do chores on the farm and just to be outside. Now, NC grew up a little torn between his parents' wishes. You see, his dad wanted him to be more scientific and practical, and his mom, after seeing some of his great watercolors, wanted him to follow his artistic interest. To please both, he enrolled in the Mechanic Arts High School in Boston, concentrating on drafting. But later, encouraged by his mother, he transferred to Massachusetts Normal Art School, where one of his instructors suggested that he kind of leaned towards illustrations. Do you know what an illustration is? It's a picture that tells a story, or a picture that's used to make a written story more enhanced. Well, when he was 20 years old, he decided to enroll in one of the best illustration schools in the whole United States. It was the Howard Pyle School of Art. Mr. Pyle taught NC how to draw drama and stressed the importance of really knowing what you're painting about. So if you're going to paint a horse, you really need to know about horses. And if you're going to paint flowers, you really need to know about flowers. Within just a few months of learning from Mr. Pyle, NC decided to submit one of his paintings to the Saturday Evening Post. It was the most popular magazine of the time. Artists who had been painting for years dreamed of having their artwork put on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. NC just sent it on a whim, but when they saw it, they loved it and they bought it. It was a painting of a bucking bronco. The magazine wanted more. Their readers loved reading about the Wild West and looking at illustrations about the Wild West. Mr. Pyle suggested to NC that he go out west to really learn what it was like in the Wild West. And that is what NC did. He headed to Colorado. And while he was there, he worked at a ranch, moving horses and cattle from one ranch to another. He got bucked off of his horse on more than one occasion and broke several bones. He was involved in a deadly stampede, and he was even a stagecoach driver for a while. He visited the Navajo Indians in Arizona and learned a lot about Native American culture. He bought costumes and artifacts, including cowboy and Indian clothing. Along the way, he crammed his portfolio full of his drawings and sketches. This one's called The Sheriff. The sheriff has just come around the bend of a canyon, and he's looking at something. The horse seems a little tentative. Maybe he sees what a tall drop-off there is to the left and doesn't want to take any chances. And like this is the ore wagon. And every time I look at this painting, I feel like I can taste the dust that's rising up out in the desert. As N.C. Wyeth's reputation grew, he was swamped with people wanting him to illustrate their books and magazines. One publisher contacted him to see if he'd be interested in illustrating a new book by the author Robert Louis Stevenson. The book was called Treasure Island. He painted 17 paintings to put in the book. He wrote to his mother that it was exciting painting these paintings, and they were the best he had ever done. The book and the illustrations were a huge success. You see, a great illustrator can figure out what picture would enrich the story beyond just reading the words. NC was able to put just the right action with just the right character, a character that he would often see in his imagination just by reading the words in the book. He used a lot of strong light with dark shadows. Because of these illustrations being a gigantic success, he was asked to illustrate another book. The name of this book was The Boy's King Arthur. Take a look at the drama NC was able to capture with his colorful knights swearing their allegiance to the king, sword battles and victory and defeat, powerful horses bravely carrying their riders in a joust, and even the tossing of Excalibur, the sword of King Arthur, into the lake after his death. NC was then hired to illustrate a book by James Fenimore Cooper titled The Last of the Mohicans. NC knew exactly how to capture the drama, the action, whether fierce or calm. NC went on to illustrate other books like Robin Hood, Robinson Crusoe, The Yearling, and Rip Van Winkle. With the money NC made with these illustrations, he was able to buy a beautiful home for his family and build an art studio for himself. NC and his wife Carolyn raised 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. He was a strict but patient father, and he adored his children. He wanted each of his kids to find what they enjoyed and then encourage them to pursue it. It didn't matter if it was scientific or artistic. His 3 girls, Henriette, Carolyn, and Anne, all became artists, and Anne also became a composer. His son Nathaniel became an engineer, and the baby of the family, Andrew, even though he was rather sickly, became an incredible artist too. Just as NC adored his children, they adored him. By now, NC had become a famous illustrator, but he wanted to do more. He had higher aspirations. He wanted to be considered a fine artist. He didn't want to just paint paintings that told a story. He wanted to paint paintings that people wanted to look at and that were beautiful. He began to concentrate on still lifes. A still life is a painting of something that's not alive, on something that's not moving. He loved painting landscapes of the areas that he lived in, Chaddsford, Pennsylvania, and Port Clyde, Maine, where he and his family would vacation in the summer. He even tried his hand at self-portraits. Despite his remarkable talent with landscapes and portraits and still lifes, people still knew him mainly as an illustrator. One day in October, NC took his little grandson, little Newell, for a car ride. People don't really know what happened that day, but for some reason, NC's car stopped on the train tracks. And unfortunately, it was when a train was coming, and coming quickly. NC was not able to get out of the car nor get his little 3-year-old grandson out of the car. The train hit them, and they both died. It was a horrible and tragic end to a profound and creative life. However, his legacy lives on in his illustrations of knights and pirates and cowboys. It also lives on in his children. Remember me telling you that his youngest child, Andrew, was somewhat sickly? Well, because of that, he spent a lot of time with NC, especially in NC's studio, and it had a profound impact on little Andy's life. And I can't wait to tell you about it. That will be the second story in our trilogy. And have I got a story for you? And don't forget to stay safe and stay healthy.